Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Joel. I'm coming to you live from Star Wars Underworld, Orange County. Matthew is not here this week. He is at San Diego Comic-Con. Although, funny enough, he is actually in Orange County this week. Um, so he is in my neck of the woods. So that's fun. But we have a very special episode for you guys anyway. Begun the Clone Wars has, but maybe not the one you're thinking of. From 2003 to 2005, Dark Horse and John Ostrander chronicled the great events of the Clone Wars, from the time of Attack of the Clones all the way up to Revenge of the Sith. And this week, we're doing a deep dive into one of these Dark Horse comics with Star Wars Republic number 50, Defense of Kamino. And I am joined by my friend and Legends fan, Mr. Redleader Antillies. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's fun talking about one of my favorite comic book writers.
I know, and I mean, well, we'll get into it when we get to it. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this and more. So yeah, check us out. Just doing some plugs, of course. You can follow us at the Yonkan Pod Blue Sky. Of course, you can also join the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where this week we might be doing another game night where we're doing some Minecraft fun. One of our good friends has created a little server for us to hang out in and do some Minecraft. I don't believe there's a tractor beam this week with Mashy being out. We checked out his last week tractor beam where they went over High Republic number 19, Ghost Agents number 5, and Ongoing number 3. I'm sure they'll be back with all sorts of fun, San Diego Comic Con fun, and more. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. So, just a little bit of news before we get into it. Essential Legends has revealed their latest entries into the Essential Legends collection with choices of 1, Honor Among Thieves, and Razor's Edge. So look forward to that. There's a nice little cover of Mara Jade, with very young looking Mara Jade during her Imperial phase.
What was
I've
Honor
never,
Among Thieves?
it's a Han Solo one, I think. Although it has an
Is it
image
the
of
Ocean's 11 one that was really late in canon? I mean
it.
Legends.
Might be. I know. Let's see. Yep. That was that Tim Zahn one. No, that was
No, it's
James
Daniel
A.
Abraham.
Corey. That
No,
was
it's Daniel
2000.
Abraham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Uh
2017.
oh dang. No. I got the Wikipedia page right here. It says Honor Among Thieves, originally titled Empire Rebellion: Honor Among Thieves. March 4th, 2014,
Oh, 14. I don't know why that said
by
17 on
James
Wikipedia.
S.A. Corey. So, yeah, definitely one of the last few ones. No, I was thinking of the Han Solo trilogy that Tim Zahn did. I think.
The Zahn didn't
I
do a
don't.
Han Solo trilogy.
No, he
There's
did a
the
book.
daily one. There's the daily one back in the day, and then there's the Young Han Solo books by A.C. Crispin.
Right. Dang. Uh, I swear he did a Han Solo book, like a one shot though.
I think Han is in Choices of One,
I think he is. Let's see.
and I am pretty sure Zahn did several short stories with Han during the era of the Tales of such and such books.
Oh,
I'm
I
pretty sure he
found it.
did quite a few of those.
It was Scoundrels. He did Scoundrels. That's what he did.
Right. Yes, he did do that.
I've also never done Razor's Edge. Never read that one before either. I think I have choice. I used to have Choices of One though somewhere. I lost it. But I had the old cover. I think it was Choices of One. It's one of the later Tim Zahn book. But yeah, check out the Essential Legends collection. Always fun, always good. But let's just get into it. Let's get into. Oh, that's not it. Let's get into Star Wars Republic number 50, the Defense of Kamino. So let's do a little backstory on this before we begin. As I said before, from 2003 to 2005, the Clone Wars were very much cataloged in Dark Horse Comics, which is very cool. To have Attack of the Clones come out and then have Dark Horse just go into it in real time, almost with the Clone Wars. And of course, you had the micro series. I had lots of games. I had the GameCube game growing up as a kid. I remember reading these back when they were coming out. Not a lot, not week to week. I was not a week to week person, but I always remembered bookstores having the white trade paperbacks of these. I had the Defense of the Camino one. I remember it had Mace Windu on it. It was blue. I remember the cover quite much in my mind. When this came out, of course, I lost it as I to get rid of stuff. But I have recently got it for my birthday that I showed with some Star Wars Epic Collection, Clone Wars Volume 1. Which had a bunch of others too. It had like Star Wars number 49, A Tales of, etc., etc. But yeah, these were good. These were very fun to read at the time. And I just remember like, oh, the Clone Wars, yay! More Clone Wars stuff is always cool. So Red, what's your history with these, and what version of the comic do you have in terms of like what collection is yours in? You have like,
Please tell me that's pre-owned, that you bought that used.
oh yeah, this was pre-owned.
Oh, thank God, because I was gonna. But the comic fan in me is like, oh my God, those corners.
Yeah, I know this
What
is
have you
owned.
done?
No, this
Yeah,
is pre-owned.
I have way worse looking stuff that I've done used, but it's always
Oh, you
like,
should see my original Thrawn trilogy books. Those are like mangled and got notes in them for some reason. They're old.
Yeah, I have the Star Wars Omnibus Clone Wars Volume 1, Republic Goes to War,
Ooh, nice.
which was printed in like 2012. And I apparently, according to the thing in the front of this, the front of my copy, I got this for Christmas 2012. I know that I got the second volume on a road trip that would have had to have been 2013. But yeah, so I must have read this back then. Probably my first Star Wars comic thing.
Ooh, nice, nice. But yeah, lots of memories. Now, here I just want to kind of do a little more background about this before we begin. So, I heard this interesting story like like almost a year ago on forums, and I'm curious what you heard. That apparently Lucasfilm actually didn't want Clone Wars stories coming out in comics yet because they wanted to hold that off until until George wanted to do something with it, which eventually he did. But apparently Lucasfilm buckled because Dark Horse really wanted to do stuff like this and not tell stories in between episodes 2 and 3. So, not 2 and 3, 1 and 2. Because the Clone Wars is a much more interesting storyline, which I don't blame him. It really is. So that's why we get the John Ostrander Republic comic, which have already been ongoing, because obviously this is number 50, for a while, since 1999, even before the Phantom Menace. Is that true that they almost didn't do this, but then Lucasfilm buckled and like, sure, you can do Clone War stories?
I'm not sure. Maybe there was some stipulations from Lucas, but he kind of let them do a lot of free reign with tie-in material.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because this stuff sold a lot of toys, and yeah, that in between 1 and 2 as well. And this definitely focuses more on the major film characters than most of the stuff from between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones did.
Mm-hmm.
That mostly was original characters and fleshing out the Jedi Council who don't get lines in the film.
Or Kiadi Mundi and finding out he has like 30 wives back home.
Yeah, he was the main character initially.
But you gotta do it for his people. You gotta do it for his people.
And like here, we're sort of shifting into making this a more just like the main Star Wars ongoing, essentially.
It really was.
Yeah, which is funny because this is issue 50, but it's also the first issue of Star Wars Republic. Because it was just Star Wars starting with Outlander, which is the arc with Kiadi-Mundi and Tatooine, that introduces Sharad and Asharad Het and all that stuff. Back in 1999, setting up right before Phantom Menace, a couple months prior. That gets to issue 49, and that issue is all set up for this issue, for issue 50, as well as sort of wrapping up, or at least being kind of a crescendo for Quinlan Vos and Ayla Sakura and all these characters that are original to Ostrander's work before we move into this much more shared universe that we get moving forward.
Speaking of shared universe, this was also the start of the original multimedia project with the Clone Wars, and I've always wondered, like, clearly, I've always wondered, like, how much did these people know going in terms of like certain things and not? Because, well, first of all, I remember in Revenge of the Sith, like there are moments where in the movie where it's like they're really linking up with the comic, where it's like Master Boss has lead the siege of Boss Pite, and Sulukamai has fallen because the Outer Rim siege was going on. Obviously Grievous, big deal, although he's introduced in the 2D show. Um, uh, and I've always wondered, like, how much info were they given as this thing went on? Because obviously, you're developing the movie, so things like Grievous probably took a while to get going before you have a good enough design, even. And obviously, Lucas and his script writing was always a bit notorious for being a little procrastinating at times. Um, so I'm curious what you would know about just like the production of like these comics in terms of coordinating to make sure that they don't completely go out off the rails with the movies, but still line up.
Yeah, I was trying to find interviews with Ostrander, but I couldn't find too much that he talks about the behind the scenes process. The comics definitely do contradict some of the micro series things, so they are kind of more on their own, relatively speaking.
I mean, there's always the infamous Labyrinth of Evil and the 2D micro series. Which one happened first? Um, Although both times Shakti gets kidnapped. Poor Shakti. Um, yeah, I was just curious about that because I always remember reading these, like, oh, these are pretty close. I mean, obviously, Dirge and Ventress also come from here. But they don't come from here, but they're added in here because obviously look how big those characters were in the 2D show. Um, but yeah, this was always such a fun thing to read. And I love, and you're right. I do like John Ostrander, who did Legacy. Also, he does the Suicide Squad for DC fans out there. Um, so yeah, I can definitely see his take on the Clone Wars. But let's get into it. Let's get into the actual comic itself. So I picked this one for a couple reasons. One, I just want to talk about the Clone Wars, and I got this comic for Christmas, so I want to use this. Okay. But I also picked this one because I remember this being more or less a standalone, but long enough issue, so we would have a lot of meat to talk about compared to like if we did number 49, because I think that's very much like ending an arc or starting an arc, and this is the equivalent stuff, and like some of the later stuff moving forward. But I also remember this one because I just remember like the attack on Kamino being a big deal at the beginning of the Clone Wars, and seeing the clones, and kind of getting a little bit more insight into that, and like the war, the early years. And also, this is where the ARC troopers come in as well. Another thing from the micro series. Um, at least I remember them being from. I think the micro series came first. Um, yeah, I just remember, and also the Mon Cala commander. I always remember that, which we'll get into in a bit. But I remember this, and I reread this for our info, and I was like, yeah, this still holds up. This is very good. Um, I just the dark, somber tone of the Clone Wars, and kind of just the early years. Maybe like this is even like year one, and just sort of like seeing how these battles are all part of a grander machination, and just sort of the action above it. Very cool stuff. But what was your big takeaway from this comic, Red? Just when you reread it after so long.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're trying to come out of the gate hot.
Hmm.
Make it clear that okay, we're a couple months in, tie into some other stuff. Like
Hmm.
I forget if no, because this comes out January 2003.
Yeah.
So this is like the beginning of what would become the multimedia project. This is the earliest stuff. And so you're essentially setting the stage for everything else.
Mhm.
And it's funny how this fits in with projects that would come, in the next year or so, like other stuff that's still Attack the Clones looking Anakin,
Mhm.
but stuff like the was it like the Soul Harvester and whatnot. The
The Dark Reaper.
Yeah, the Battle of Raxus Prime, all that stuff. Where this is
Mhm.
meant in it's very clearly laid out here that this is setting up the uh, the separatists' momentum to stop.
Right, and even just the design, it's like it's all like it's just Jedi starfighters versus vulture droids, or
Yeah, they mention that they have starfighters that are purchased that Cyanar is developing them, but they're not shipped yet, and so they're gonna have to use the Actus, I think. Yeah, these are Actus ones.
and how a million more clone troopers are in various stages of preparation. Remember the clone trooper numbers debates?
Insane.
I know, it's like, wait, the Republic only started with 250,000, and then it's like, wait, what? Like, what? What numbers did they have?
If the
Um,
American Civil War was larger in scale than this,
I know. It's crazy. I'm not quite sure what numbers metrics they're using these days. But no, I like seeing that. I also like seeing the variety of Jedi here. I mean, we got Ayla Secura. We got obviously Quinlan Voss is in this, at least cameoing at the hologram, but he's their favorite. So, and yeah, you're right. This is very Attack the Clones. This is still very Attack the Clones Anakin. Like he's got that angst. He's like seeing visions. Which I thought the seeing visions part was actually really interesting because like kind of hinting at like visions are going to be a problem for Anakin moving forward.
hmm
Um, but also it's like, oh, where is it? There's a moment where in near the end of the first issue. I mean, the first little mini story, Brothers in Arms, where Obi-Wan's like, "Hey, Anakin, you can talk to me. I feel bad. I haven't given you time to breathe." And Anakin's like when he's fighting, he's like, "I feel at peace." So I kind of like that where it's like, yeah, he's fighting and he feels at peace. Uh-oh, that's a problem. But no,
Yeah.
I really liked that. What did you make of like Anakin and Obi-Wan's kind of dynamic here in
Yeah,
the story?
Ostrander immediately nails the characterization, I think. He plays with this idea of like Obi-Wan never having really chosen Anakin as his Padawan,
Mhm.
and the feeling of distrust between all of them, between the two of them.
Mhm.
And obviously, Anakin's much more distant right now. And I mean, Shmi has died. He's also preoccupied about Padme and all of his drama. But it is a two-way street. Like Obi-Wan is still standoffish,
Right.
and you get this interesting end to that of like this conflict between them has resolved, and Obi-Wan is kind of like, "Oh, thank God, this is over. That's over with. We're done." And like they don't really get to finish that conversation, and it's like you just see the pattern of papering over the specific immediate problem Anakin's having without talking to him about the more serious issues he has.
Yep. Anakin's never been a well-adjusted person. I also like how he's tinkering with the robot. Um,
hmm
that's a good
That
little
always
touch.
stood out to me. I love that, him meditating while doing mechanical stuff.
That's something they've kept in even some of the newer stuff,
hmm
even like Vader just kind of tinkering with robots, what he's brooding. Um,
I like
I
the
like,
fact that we get to see him bond a little bit with Ayla. We get
yeah,
other
me
Jedi
too.
interacting and giving him wisdom.
Yeah, me too. I always think it's interesting when Anakin talks to the other Jedi who aren't, like either Obi-Wan or even Ahsoka. Even like it's like even like when he talks, like it's like I like moments like when he would get to hang out with Master Yoda for a time. I always think that's always kind of fun in stories where he's like, it's not just Obi-Wan. Like, what do other Jedi think of Anakin? Or deal with him? And even like I think it's interesting because you know they can kind of I don't want to be a good they could have been a good sounding board for Anakin, but like how, like you're different with your friends or even like other non-adults who aren't your parents. You can be a little bit more loose with them or open with them at times. I mean that's what Palpatine tried to do, but in a bad way. But with the Jedi, I mean like maybe it can be a little bit more not as like I don't want to talk to you, Dad, kind of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's cool just seeing Ayla here as well. You're right. I love this panel of the Trade Federation ship and the Vulture droids and the big T ship. That was a good one too. Um, what you just what do you make like the structure of these comics? Like just the three little mini stories and how they all connect.
Yeah, it's interesting that the first two are
Mm-hmm.
sort of sequential, and then the third one sort of nebulously takes place during. That one definitely has the most sort of confusion, no end in sight as to
Yeah,
what's exactly going on.
yeah. It's interesting that these are like a three little short stories, but they kind of don't have like an over. I mean, they do, and they don't have an overarching arc to them. Like, I kind of wish the calamari. I mean, we can get into him later. The calamari commander could have been like introduced in the beginning, and kind of you could see him
Mm-hmm.
throughout the whole thing. Um, stuff like that. That would have been cool. Um, I also really like this guy, this Jedi fake guy. I don't remember him that much.
Which one?
The one that looks like that little creature that Anakin raced on Tatooine. He's a small guy.
Yeah, that's So Choi. He's in Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, cool.
Very briefly, he's riding on one of those giant dragonflies on Kashyyyk that fly by the camera in one of the
Ooh.
establishing shots.
Oh, that's
He
cool.
was going to be one of the council members, but I forget why they like last minute changed that. But Coleman Kejak, I believe, exists because I think it was because like Lucas didn't want two short characters because it would be weird in frame. You'd have to shoot in a way that would like include just
Mhm.
like that eyes up of one. And
That's
so it was
fair.
just like, just have a weird. I don't even know what the heck to call Coleman Kejak.
That's fair. That's fair. Um, but yeah, really again, really like Anakin's characterization. He's very broody, but in a good way. Like you can kind of see that intensity, that dark intensity you're gonna see a lot more of as the war goes on. Uh, but no, I very good as well. Let's get a little bit into Django's legacy, where we get some clone action here. Um, I find the clones in this stuff very fascinating, and I actually it's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I've always wanted to ask, because I've been doing like some deep diving into clone stuff, recently, and I've asked some friends about this too, and I've learned some interesting stuff. So I'm curious to get your take on this. Do you think that when making the prequels, it's gonna sound weird, but like, hear me out. Just, do you think that making the prequels and kind of George in his own mind and his own world building lore was going to make the clones the stormtroopers? And what I mean by that, because I know that sounds like weird in hindsight, but here's what I mean: that the stormtroopers that we see in the original trilogy were still going to be clones, and that there's a timeline where George just has Tim just do voiceover for the stormtroopers in the original trilogy. Where, because in canon and in the newer stuff, we have the clones, and then the clones kind of get phased out with volunteer troops, even though they're still clones in the military. That happens a little bit quicker in canon, but in George's mind, maybe during when making this, he really was going to think, no, the Empire was going to keep the clones, and the Imperial stormtroopers were just going to be clones. They would have a clone army as part of that kind of weird nebulous sci-fi world building. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the intention was always that it was a transitionary thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, I mean, partly because it doesn't seem like Lucas intended for the clones to be fighting alongside the Republic until Episode 2 was being written. It seems pretty likely that wasn't until much later in development.
Interesting.
And so I think when he does that, when he goes and creates this whole idea of the clones and has them obviously visually being set up to look like the stormtroopers, I think he's always intending for that to be okay. This is, you have the parallel brainwashed armies of the droids and the clones, and we're going to see them all get kind of taken off the table once Palpatine doesn't need them anymore. And you then shift to probably he still imagine like, yeah, they might still have clones. Palpatine might even still be producing new clones, but I mean, given how small the numbers are that they talk about and everything, I don't think the implication was meant to be that the stormtroopers that we see are Tamora Morrison.
Fair. That's interesting. Yeah, fair. That's very fair. Oh, it's funny because I heard somewhere that apparently in Star Wars Galaxies, the people making that game were apparently told stormtroopers were clones. I think I've been wrong, of course, because I just heard that during a random chat. So they could be completely wrong what they said. But no, I mean that's a good point too. It was just something I heard people speculate about on forums and stuff, and I'm like, oh, maybe. But no, yeah, you could be very right. But I also do find the clones in this very interesting as well because they are a lot more stoic, um, in this compared to what they would get later when we try to give them personalities, or more than personalities. This is also the introduction. I find it funny, it's like Ayla, I mean not Ayla Secura, Shakti's here. Shakti's very much associated with Kamino. Um, we have obviously the Prime Minister Lama Su. Uh, and of course, we have the ARC Troopers. So, what do you make of the ARC Troopers and just the clones in general in this story? Your big takeaway.
I think it's funny how many iterations of these are not like other clones. They're more intelligent or free thinking. It is kind of weird that we never really follow up on they're being like held in tanks, and they're worried about what happens when they get let out. I'm not exactly sure what the point was with that. I think this is before Order 66 has ever come down the chain from Lucas. So I think the idea, I think that kind of contradicts Order 66 to some extent, or at least if he knew ahead of time, he probably wouldn't have had that thing about, oh, these clones are, free thinking, they might be dangerous to everyone. When it's like, you probably want to keep that secret, or be like, oh, these are super elite clones, but they're all very conditioned or whatever. Like it's playing with some ideas that don't really go anywhere. And you sort of have the same thing with, they're sort of like what we get with Commandos very shortly after, and the Bad Batch as well. Like we do this kind of a lot. I think Alpha is an interesting enough character. He doesn't really have depth, but for what he is, he's neat, and it's interesting that even though he is the clone with the most personality in this era of Legends, he also that there is a cap on that. Like he doesn't have much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember later stories, but later stuff, and this was kind of Lucas's big thing, was that the Jedi, you see the Jedi's influence on clones, and how they really make just what would have been stoic, yes, take the command post. Try to really influence them to be their own individuals, be creative, try to almost develop a clone society. In a sense, there's definitely a clone community in here. But But in this,
Yeah,
it
I
does seem.
think you have to do that for TCW. You have to create individual clones and give them more unique personalities and customized stuff and have like their own sort of eternal society. Though I do always love the deeply messed up nature of the clones in the especially the comics and some of the novels from this era, where it is just like they are completely stunted and
Hmm.
it's uncomfortable for everyone, including the Jedi, to be around them.
I mean,
Uh,
that's. Oh, go ahead.
there's that like short story that's in the paperback for Shatterpoint called
Hmm.
Equipment, where the clones are like referring to themselves as equipment, and
Ooh.
like that dynamic is just really interesting with the parallel to the droids.
Hmm.
And I think the I am still partial to the clones just getting their order and doing Order 66 without needing an inhibitor chip.
No, I understand. I think both are tragic, but like for different reasons. I think it's like one's a tragedy of like, well, these people really are just equipment. I mean, I hate calling people equipment, but they are. Sorry, I mean they are advanced, genetically, emotionally stunted clones that, hey, when we're done with them, we're gonna throw them in the trash. Um, where the other one is, here's a society that could have bloomed into something beyond war, maybe, and then at the end of the day, they still get thrown into the trash. But no, I agree. It, and then of course, although and also, although another thing about the clones of this era is, of course, all the Mandalore stuff. Thank you, Karen Travis. That gets inserted into them. And I think something about Alpha. I'm actually curious what your thoughts on like his loyalty to Django. I thought that was interesting, but I feel like again, like you said, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of weird.
I guess they trained personally under him, so they'd have a direct relationship.
That's fair. Do you like the idea of Django kind of being close to his clones, or do you think Django would just be like, "Eh, I'm just making money out of this"?
I mean, he might have he might have just trained them, and that is the closest thing to social interaction they ever get.
That's fair. Um, I mean that's fair. Just looking through this comic, I love some of these panels. I love this panel, by the way, of the ARC troopers just going down the rope. That's cool. Art and this is gorgeous. One another one I really liked is, the kids are being attacked, and then Alpha's like, "You could have saved yourself. You're not defenseless. You've been trained to grab. You've been trained for this. Grab the nearest weapon and get ready for." And then they get shocked by the Droidicas. Um, which again, I think it's messed up. It's like, yeah, these kids are just weapons. Uh, It's also kind of interesting just seeing the droid designs here, and it's just normal B1s. There aren't a lot of super battle droids in here. I think there's one in like the beginning.
Yeah, there's
There's
one in the
one.
middle that's like pointing at the Shistavanian Wolfman Jedi.
I miss Wolfman Jedi. It was cool. Um, I found the Kaminoans interesting in this too. Just in terms of like their relationship to each other is like very, very opaque, because like Jedi and Kaminoans are just like, we really like you guys. Um, and then of course we got Anakin and Obi-Wan doing their thing. Anything about this little area that I didn't bring up that you wanted to mention?
Not really. It's short and sweet.
And finally, we got No End in Sight. So this is the one I remember the most as a kid growing
Hmm.
up, because I just remember a Mon Cala commander. Probably my brain was like, "Hey, look, it's like Admiral Akbar." I knew it wasn't Admiral Akbar, but I remember very much this being a thing. So the thing I do like about this issue, and I think this is probably, I don't know if this is my favorite part, but I definitely think this is the most interesting, is I do like seeing, for lack of a better term, noble separatist commanders who aren't just psychotic. So just not General Grievous. I think that to me stood out, was like, this guy's not mwahaha evil. He does seem like he's a decent commander. He cares about his men. He doesn't want to just necessarily slaughter them all. I mean, I don't think he cares about the droids, but kind of like the Jedi.
So he
They
does use the droids effectively. Like he has them retreat at
that's true.
points. He tries to preserve his units.
Oh, okay, that's fair. That's fair. So
He doesn't think that he just has an endless supply of something. He's clearly a smarter commanding officer.
no, I agree. Agree with that. So that's good. And I also like how he's willing to go into combat himself. I really like that. Um, and I think it's kind of interesting that everybody kind of, even Anakin and Obi-Wan, are like, what's this guy doing? He seems smarter than that. Even Mace Windu at the end of this is like, I knew about this guy. Something doesn't something feels fishy. I'm sorry. I had to do that. Boo. But no, something feels very wrong. And at the very end, it's like Sidious and Dooku are like, yes, he was a talented commander, we will send him to the slaughter because we need to lose this battle so we can keep the Clone Wars going, which is just um this is something I think the Ostrander run gets quite well in terms of depicting the Clone Wars. Is just how much of a pointless war this is. How much of
Mm-hmm.
just everybody's just being sent here into the trash. Right? Like Dooku,
It,
like,
it,
oh, go ahead.
it really feels sometimes with TCW like they forget that both sides are constantly being played by Palpatine beyond just the long con. Like that Palpatine and Dooku are actively intervening
Mhm.
constantly in the actual like not just outcome of the war, but the way it's fought, every point in it. They're not just kind of throwing it all out there and being like, yeah, we'll wrap this up eventually and then we'll show our hand then. They are
Mhm.
doing machinations upon machinations all throughout.
Yeah, I know you're wrong. I try to always look at these two things as sort of different takes, and obviously everyone has their preferences. But no, I agree. I've always said that as much as I do love things about GCW, and I do, I think its weakest aspect is weirdly the war itself. All the best episodes kind of have nothing to do with the war. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, and because it's like even in TCW, there are times where I'm like, Dooku, are you trying to actually win the war for the Separatists? I'm not like I could like what are we doing here? Like I like the Separatists are kind of built in to lose. Um, like I even think that's still the same even with the new reset. 'Cause, like I remember the Revenge of the Sith novelization and how kind of Dooku thinks that okay, I surrender, then I'm gonna give myself up. I'm gonna blame everything on Grievous. It's all Grievous's fault. I'm the honorable statesman. Grievous did all the war crimes and the genocides, on my without my knowledge. And then Anakin's gonna fall, and then Palpatine, Anakin, and Dooku are gonna be a happy trio ruling the galaxy together.
Yeah, it's
Um,
gonna be a power sharing agreement, he thinks. He thinks this is freaking Southern Beirut in 1985 or whatever. And it's like, nah, no, you're not long for this world, Dooku.
Dooku's like, I'll be the Speaker of Parliament, and Palpatine will be Emperor, and no, I'll be the Prime Minister. Anakin will be Speaker of Parliament.
He really
That's how.
thinks he's gonna he thinks it's gonna be a reconstruction like like the American Civil War, with like him being a Robert E. Lee figure or someone like returning to politics after the fact.
Right. It really is. Like it's I still make that my personal headcanon to what Dooku thinks is going on. In terms of what he thinks the whole Battle of Coruscant and the Clone Wars are gonna be. Because again, like the Separatists aren't going to win. Um, that they're not supposed to win. They're supposed to eventually, like, we cut the valve and then we cut the money off, and then it's like, okay,
Mhm.
we reintegrate them back into
I
a new empire.
I can't remember a point in TCW where Dooku intentionally sets up his side to lose.
No, I mean, even kind of the Naboo duel part 1, uh, where Anakin and Dooku almost look like Anakin's about to kill him. Does seem a bit off. Yeah, no. Like, there are times where I feel like I don't wanna make this too much about TCW, where it's like, okay, I can see Sidious using the Separatists to do more of the dirtier work, like taking out the Night Sisters.
Right.
Or deal with Maul, but that's kind of it. Like, outside of that, it's like you could just kind of like separatist plan. Like, what was the malevolence for? Um, you know, do you want to win? No, I mean,
Well, I
testing
guess
your
I kind of buy the malevolence as like having both sides test stuff so that then the Empire will have all of this data that they can look through for what worked, what didn't work, what can they iterate on. Sort of the whole war serves as a trial period for all of this stuff.
right. Um, the closest that I know Dooku clearly does not think the separatists are going to win is when we deal with ironically the clone ship episode where Dooku
Mm.
knows that Order 66 is going to happen. So he clearly knows that Order 66 is the end game. Um, but yeah, in terms of like actually the separatists are meant to lose, um, it's very yeah, I think this did a little bit better of just showing Dooku and Sidious are really just like, okay, like we all send the separatists here so they can do a thing to get the Republic. Oh, and maybe that bank episode with when the separatists attack the banks and then Palpatine gets control of the banks.
Mm.
That's a close one. But yeah, there's really not that much in it. Let's get back to the commander, the Mon Cala
Yeah, I was gonna
commander
say
here.
like the one thing,
Oh, yeah.
one last thing about TCW, sort of, it's
Mhm.
hard to tell in that show who is winning the war at a given point, and I think that is something this issue in particular does a very good job of. It's 2 months in, and Geonosis happened, and it's kind of a draw, but also a
Mhm.
bunch of Jedi get slaughtered. Raxus Prime isn't mentioned here because it doesn't exist yet, because that's from a video game that won't come out for a few more months. But that is another huge loss.
Mhm.
And so we get it pretty explicitly shown here of like the Republic is desperate to allow the Separatists to attack Kamino so that they can finally get a win. And the Separatists don't
Mhm.
want to tip their hand too much, and so they're set, or from their perspective of those like Ars Dangor who think they're supposed to win,
Mhm.
is we don't want to tip our hand too much, so we're just going to send one ship. Like it works why there isn't this huge invasion fleet. They're just sending the one Lucre Hawk essentially because it is just a hidden run kind of quick strike in the cloning facilities. And Palpatine orchestrates this so that there is,
A stalemate.
and so that it's stalemate with Mirai dead and Kamino still operational. The Clone War will not end soon.
Exactly. And okay, I'll make one more TCW comparison. Compare that to the actual Kamino episodes that we did get, which I do enjoy. Don't get me wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I like the character stuff and I like Nines, but when you look at the actual political stuff and the actual war,
Yeah,
it why are they attacking?
why
They,
are they attacking? Who approved of that?
and they're trying to steal Django's blood or like cloning stuff. Where I'm like, Palpatine, you have it right there. You don't need to. You don't need to steal your own stuff.
Yeah, like that is the Separatists fully operating outside of the purview of Sidious and Dooku, which is fine. They can't be doing that in a way that actively jeopardizes the entire Republic's war effort.
No, yeah, and And if you if you ever wanted to play it where like Dooku is trying to do like rule of two stuff, that's fine. I'm not actually against that. I think in some ways he kind of is with Ventress and
Hmm.
Savage, obviously. Like he kind of he because every says wants to do that. Um but it does seem really kind of like I feel like Dooku's smart enough to know like that's still not gonna help you, buddy. Like that could really damage this whole operation. Um I mean, I guess that's also the format of comics where they're a little more serialized, and TCW weirdly is the anthology episodic show where every episode's like we won, and then next week's like the Separatists are winning. Um, uh, so yeah. I always heard in the Revenge of the Sith novel though they acted more like the Separatists was actually winning the war, and Coruscant was like almost like a shock compared to like what it is now, where it's like the Separatists are on the back foot and Coruscant's like one last desperate strike. At least in the
Yeah.
novel. Um, yeah, but let me get to the calamari commander. Here's another kind of weird thing about that, which I do like the commander, but like, why is the Mon Cala commander helping the separatists? I thought they were on the Republic side. Shouldn't it be Cord? That was always a weird
Well,
choice.
I like that honestly though, because it
Okay.
means that there's individual people within the Mon Calamari who would support the separatists or believe in whatever they're being told. Like he is this honorable guy who, doesn't question what Ars Dangor is saying to him. He doesn't really question. I love the fact that he doesn't realize he's betrayed, even by the end. Because Ars sends him down under the city to attack the shield generator for the whole of Topacana City, and there's nothing there. And he never thinks that he might have been sold out.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks, oh, they must have moved it, or maybe there's something I'm not seeing, and then, oh, dang, we have to flee. He never, has that moment of like, oh, I've been betrayed. He's too gullible to the end, or he's too honor fixated that he couldn't imagine it. He's completely naive about this war.
No, that's a good point, and I do like you like that. Also, I don't think that's Arth Dengor. I think that is Magistrate Passel Argente of the Corporate
Mm.
Alliance. Arth Dengor is one of Palpatine's advisors, but
Oh yeah, yeah,
same roby, big hat
yeah.
thing.
The guy with the robe that like looks in crocheted, like it looks like it has holes in it.
Yeah, that's Passel Argente of the Corporate Alliance. But no, I guess you're right. No, is he a mercenary or is he just like some citizen that they decide, hey, you're a good commander, want to help us out? Because
I mean, by Mace seems spooked by that. Like says, I knew of him. He was a smart soldier. Why would he attempt such an ill-planned attack, and on whose orders? Like it seems like individual people and some of their like personal assets would just turn traitor. I mean,
right,
it's not too. Obviously, the Clone Wars are like most clearly inspired by the American Civil War,
right.
and that is very much a thing that happened throughout the early months of, or even before the war began, of just like there was no one left. Like Washington D.C. could have been taken, which is part of what this arc is even doing. Of like the Republic is completely vulnerable. The Separatists are even able to attack. I mean, the Confederates, after like it's a couple. There's reasons for it, but like
Mhm.
things could have been doomed if the Confederates had just kept pushing after they won at the first Battle of Bull Run. Because they're just right by DC. They could have taken DC right then and there, theoretically. Like on so many levels in that first year of the war,
Mhm.
the Union is just underperforming. It's all over the place. Lincoln is trying to find out who is even left.
Mhm.
When some people do show up for duty,
Mhm.
they're like surprised. Like it's a uh when Admiral Farragut shows up because he's from the South, technically, though he's from like a long uh, American Navy family. When
Mhm.
he shows up in DC and offers his services, he's like, it's his job. He is still an admiral. Everyone distrusts him because they're like, well, you're from the South. Why aren't you with the Confederates? He's like, but that would be treason. And they're like, but why are you on our side? Like they have to go to Sherman, who's also from the South, and have him vouch for him and be like, no, I think some people are loyal to us. We don't suck that much that people wouldn't be, that there are some people stupid enough to think we can actually win this at this rate. And look, you just kind of have to take those guys. It's what Lincoln says about Grant after Shiloh and all the slaughter of that, where people are saying, butcher, the butcher Grant, remove him from his position. And Lincoln's response is, I cannot spare this man. He fights. That's all it takes. He's willing to actually fight. And so
Mhm.
you get the Republic in that situation of like, they have nothing. They're using starfighters, kind of like how the Union was completely reliant on outdated tech. They had like a high seas fleet, but they were requisitioning civilian ships and then just putting pig iron essentially on top of them to create the city class ironclads to do riverine combat. And the Navy didn't want any part of that, so they had to the Army had to create its own little mini Navy within it because the other Navy thought that was below them. And like just all of this stuff. And you see that with like, they don't have starfighters. They have the acclimators, but they don't have starfighters. They have to just rely on this religious order using their ships to fight.
Yeah, and that is like, again, TCW comparison. Um, that is one thing I do think that this era did made interesting. Where both armies are not fully formed yet. Where
Mm-hmm.
in TCW, we already have the Star Destroyer thingies. Although we do still use Phase 2 clone troopers, and the Separatists seem to be pretty formed already. Granted, we don't know how many months TCW actually starts, but
Yeah, it's really just the starfighters for the Republic that's
right.
behind because we get the torrent fighters.
Are those like the ones that are like an upside down V?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, the V.
what you see in the 2D show before they switch to the
Mm-hmm.
episode 3 looking X-Wing models?
Yeah, the
Um,
arcs.
okay, yeah. But but you're right. Not like in the Civil War. They're kind of building their army, and like in the Civil War, they're centralizing the government. One of the big things I think about when it comes to the Civil War is you can make an argument that's the true birth of the modern U.S. when
Mm-hmm.
the federal, it's not the United States plural. Every state's kind of doing its own thing, although we do have a single currency. It's United States, more of a federation.
I mean, even
Kind of.
with currency, we have greenbacks. Then we
That's
start printing money. I mean, there's the whole greenback political party after the war. People did not trust the government printing money. They were like, "This is worthless." It's script essentially as far as they're concerned. You have this just huge shift towards, a centralized state or something that can actually function as a government over all of its constituent parts. But yeah, so I can buy that like Amon Calamari would turn traitor and be like, oh, this is about pride, or how dare there were guys who were even from the north who were like, how dare Lincoln attack the rights of these states to secede,
Mhm.
and would side with them and would
I
just
mean,
take their entire units.
oh yeah, I mean, Corey Datapad and get a good video on this. Of even the separatists kind of had to build up their forces. I mean, ironically, they started getting better when they started centralizing. When General Gree was just like, gonna decentralize this army here. Keep the local forces in power, but we have a centralized command under me and my cough. Uh, so even it's sort of like both sides are centralized, even though one is the Confederacy, um, on paper. Um, So yeah, I mean, I guess you're right on that. Everyone's kind of formulating their armies. And it's like, even local forces and whatnot are kind of like, where do we fit in the chain of command and all this, and where do the clones fit? Um, so no, I agree. That's a good point. Um, let's also talk about, even though this isn't in the although one of the reasons I brought up the Moncala is something that you brought out to me, and I've been sharing it with all my friends. Um, about why the Moncala is an interesting choice is, especially when we find out later why the Quarren don't like the Moncala, is Moncala are kind of sucky. I found that out today, a couple days ago. Thanks for that. Yeah, they did not treat the Quarren well, not at all. So I just found that interesting.
Yeah, the lore in Legends and canon
Is it
is
still canon?
essential.
I'm not sure.
It's not explicitly canon, but like TCW essentially keeps the same social dynamics and the same framing as like it kind of sucks that they're second class citizens, but also they are treated as more barbaric, and that it's more about the more empathetic members of the Mon Cala, like the oppression of the Quarren is there to enlighten part of Mon Cala society, not for the liberation of the Quarrens. Like it's sort of it's weird and sort of treated as an afterthought, or like, oh, they're being manipulated, used, instead of treating that as like a serious grievance. And yeah, so we have the Quarren. The whole narrative in Legends and Canon is essentially,
Residential schools. It's missionary schools from.
yeah, it's like the American frontier, but treated unironically like it's a good thing in a very weird way.
Yikes. Yeah, that's not good. I just thought that was an interesting little bit of lore when you brought up this comic. Um, but I just thought, because it's a Moncala uh commander who I really do like. I miss having more noble separatist commanders. We've kind of gone back to that a couple times in like an episode of Bad Batch and Tales of, where we kind of get a few commanders who aren't just psychotic evil, but it's like, hi, you seem to care about your people. You actually care about we actually the governor of Raxus Prime and Bad Batch. Like, oh, you seem to care um about the people. You're not just Dooku's evil pawn. Because that's something I like about the separatists as a faction, and I just don't think we do enough of. There are a lot of people who it was, I always love calling general grievances. Aha. But they just joined the wrong. How do I put this? They're. I mean, I guess it is kind of the heroes on both sides. Like, I get why you joined, and you do kind of. I get why you want to secede. It's just join the guy who's also a Sith Lord who's going to try to backstab you. Um, which I just always think is always makes the Separatists so interesting. Where it's like there are commanders who probably do care about their people, but also Grievous, Dooku, Sidious are all psychopaths. Um, I don't know. I just think that's always been interesting to me about the Separatists. Um, especially compared to like the actual Confederacy in the real world. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean it is very consistent when you look at the what it's paralleling. And yeah, you had the people who are fixated on, oh, my state, right or wrong, and then you have the people who are loyal to their own specific interests, or who have some weird sense of nobility and fetishize kind of the aristocracy, or this weird idea that what they're doing is for freedom, and the people who consider it like a second American Revolution. Uh, and you get the sort of elements of that with the separatists, even if, because the nature of how the war ends, you don't really get your oh god, is it Longstreet? Who like Confederate like the after the war Confederates hate him and slander him because he essentially works with the Union earnestly for Reconstruction and had like was kind of the one guy in the room who was like, maybe we should just offer abolition if they serve in the military, and he was like thrown out of the room. And so like every Confederate general in their stuff in their memoirs just slanders the hell out of him because of that. It's like we obviously don't really get that. I mean, I guess we kind of do with the rebellion, but that's a whole different thing
There's
of like people rehabilitating themselves.
I I don't think it's just like people rehabilitating themselves, but there is a well, actually no, it wouldn't be because they're working for the bad guys. But there's an interesting plot point in Alexander Freed's The Mask of Fear, which came out was it this year. Yeah, it was this year. Um, where one of the plot points is reintegration of separatist worlds. We actually get to see members of separatist parliament um, get reintegrate back into the Galactic Senate. And one of the plot points is when Mon's trying to try her in vain early stories of maybe trying to edge out the Empire's evilness into the Senate, which he's obviously going to give up later down the line with Andor. What she finds is a lot of the Separatist Parliament members actually are going to be like the most pro Empire people ever. Now they're just like, I don't want this to happen again. My planet got decimated in the Clone Wars, so I'm voting yes on anything Palpatine wants. He wants to build the Destroyer of Doom weapon. Yes, Palpatine all the way. Number one Palpatine stand right here. Um, uh, which you think Mon thought hey, you're the Separatist, you should be like the most rebellious members, and they're like, no, we don't want to be the rebellious members anymore. We just want peace and reconstructing of our planets. So we're gonna give the Empire everything they want. We're gonna be Palpatine's best votes in the Senate. Um, I'm not sure if there's anything like that in American history, but uh, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know this is a bit of a short discussion compared to our normal talks, but overall, I liked this issue. Overall, I thought it was cool. It's definitely, it's probably not like the most in depth. I'm sure like there's. I know the next one is the one with the dead Gungans that I showed an image of a
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks ago. Is that I know that's one you really like, right?
I don't remember that story very well actually. I know it's when Ventress first shows up, as well as Dirge in the comics, at least.
I remember. Do you remember the nightmare fuel of Dirge's actual face from these comics?
Yeah.
It's creepy as heck. Um, but yeah, these are fun all the same. It's a nice little Star Wars tales of a Kamino who backstabs the Jedi because they're sick of working for one of the scientists, apparently, which was interesting in this issue. But no, overall, I liked it. I love seeing kind of the earliness of the Clone Wars. Anakin's kind of he's kind of liking this Clone Wars thing going on. He's feeling at peace, and I love the Mon Cala arc. Um, I thought it was all really cool. The art is lovely, by the way. I love the artwork in here and just seeing all the little designs and whatnot. Um, yeah, this is a good issue. Red, how about you? Just final thoughts on the issue overall.
Yeah, it's a good opening to what will be the rest of this series up until it transitions into Star Wars. Does it
Dark
transition into
Times?
M? Yeah, I think it is Dark Times for the number he continues. Um, yeah, it's the beginning of a huge shift for this comic.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. Always, highly recommend it for anybody reading, and you recommend it to kind of like, hey, these stories kind of inspired Clone Wars episodes in some ways. Obviously we got Quinlan Voss and we got Kamino being attacked, so there's that. But yeah, uh, thank you everyone. I know this was a short episode, bit of our own tractor beam. Uh, hopefully we'll be coming back again soon. Matthew will not be back next week. He'll be back the week after next at any Comic Con. Let me put on the thingy here. And thank you, Red, for joining us for this discussion on Ostrander's Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let me get my stuff up. Thank you, everybody. You can follow me at GID20234 on Blue Sky, GID20234 on Blue Sky, or you can follow me at the Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANON at bluesky.com. And of course, follow us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. So yeah, that's all, and we will decide what I'm going to do next week. But until then, let's blow this thing and head home.